Seeing as Pluto is very soon to be entering Aquarius, and therefore Pluto is very much in people's minds and psyches and on the horizon at the moment, I thought I would do a brief video just talking about the meaning of Pluto in the natal chart. What does Pluto represent? Why do we have Pluto in the natal chart? And what's the deeper significance of moving Pluto through the signs? There's a lot of talk amongst the astrology community and people interested in astrology about how difficult and evil and bad Pluto is. But I wanted to do a quick video to try and save Pluto's reputation a little bit. And hopefully by the end of the video, you'll feel slightly different towards Pluto and towards your own natal Pluto placement too. So Pluto is as worse as it can possibly get. So I laugh when I start the video in that way slightly, but you'll realize why I'm saying that by the end of the video. Pluto does represent the worst that life can get. So it represents things like trauma, taboo issues that no one wants to even think about or address, the truly horrific things of life. It represents psychological woundings and mental and emotional traumas that are deep down and hidden and buried. It represents existential fear, the basic fear of annihilation. And of course, supposedly worst of all, it represents death. So we can see why Pluto has got a bit of a difficult reputation, and there's a little bit of fear around Pluto and the Pluto placement in the chart and around any transits that are happening for an individual to do with Pluto, such as Pluto Square Pluto, for example. So it doesn't have the best reputation. With all of these things I've just listed, it basically digs down deep and regurgitates them. And it does that on two levels. It does that on an individual level, so person to person, and also on a collective level in society. It will reach down to the depths or the bowels of life and the individual psyche and churn up all of these really difficult things that no one really wants to have to deal with or face. But if we think for a moment about what is the deeper wisdom of this act, why would Pluto be digging so deep to find these really hard, difficult things? Why not let them be, leave them alone, let them lie where they rest, and get on with the more enjoyable sides of life? So there is a deep wisdom here that Pluto is trying to unearth from deep within each one of us in our lives. And that wisdom is essentially to take us as individuals and as a collective to the worst possible places in life, the worst possible scenarios and the most difficult to stomach situations and scenarios in life. Because if we are taken to those places, we can come out the other side feeling slightly less afraid of them. So as human beings, we go through life with many challenges and especially with many fears. And as human beings and egos, we, generally speaking, do have a fear of death or a fear of deep trauma or abuse or psychological woundings or deep existential terrors of some kind or another. Most of us, it's true to say, unless you're a highly enlightened being, of course, that we are afraid of these things. We are deeply afraid of them on different levels. To some, they are more willing, they are more Plutonic in nature to go to those places and they can hold their own in the really tough times. And for others, they can't even think about them or go there even in their imagination without having some kind of internal breakdown or obscene levels of fear that then they can't handle. So on the whole, we do wish to avoid the things that we fear the most and the most tragic and awful, difficult things of life that no one wants to speak about. We want to avoid them on the whole. And because we want to avoid them, we are bound and chained by them. We are held in a lock and key chain by our own fears and our own unwillingness to go to the places that seem the darkest and the most difficult. So this chain holds us in place. And while it may seem as though it might keep us safe, for example, the avoidance, etc., it doesn't really, because it doesn't allow us to expand and grow, but also it doesn't allow us to tap in to our deepest, truest natures, which is one of joy and bliss and ease and happiness and fulfillment, contentment, a real sense of peace and connection with the entire flow of life. If we are bound by the chains that hold us from our fears and our anxieties, then we will never truly get to go to our essence, because we will be spending a lot of time and making a lot of effort simply surviving and avoiding all of these plutonic things in life that we don't want to face. So it takes a lot of energy and focus and time to live a life, and many people will do this for their whole lives, and in fact lifetime after lifetime, trying to avoid the dark places. So Pluto is the lord of the underworld, and no one really wants to pay a visit to the underworld. If we think about Christianity and the Bible, then we are taught the very basic concepts of heaven and hell. And you could say that Pluto is the lord of hell. It certainly feels like that sometimes. And we are taught in general that we wouldn't want to visit hell, that we want to visit heaven instead. And things like the Bible perpetuates that belief system. So Pluto does not mean in our charts that we will be affected by all of these things that I've listed: taboo issues, trauma, psychological woundings, existential fears and anxieties. Yes, we will all be affected by death. That is Pluto's final word on life and humanity, but we won't necessarily be affected by tragedy and trauma and sorrow and the really difficult stuff of life that we usually suppress. That's not what Pluto's placement in a chart generally means, I think. So where Pluto is placed in your chart is the area of life in which you are making a great deal of effort to suppress and avoid and hold back. So it is your point of suppression and the point at which you are kept under a lock and chain, but it also is your point of liberation and freedom. And it's really quite simple, and Pluto's message is quite simple. All you have to do is face it. All you have to do is look at whatever it is for you that's dark and difficult in the eye, face to face, and observe it and witness it, and you will become liberated from it. Because when you look at something difficult in the eye, and when you experience something difficult, it becomes less frightening. So it's a little bit like when you have an experience in life, you're afraid of something happening, and you have all sorts of imaginations about what that might feel like and how awful it would be. Then that thing happens to you and you actually go through that experience. And it's not to say that it's not incredibly difficult and harrowing for you, but you come out the other side and you're okay, and you are now a little bit less afraid of that particular thing happening because you've already been through it and you've already survived. So this is Pluto's wisdom. In a way, it's trying to get us to face things and go there and survive them so that we can come out the other side a little bit less afraid of them. This is the wisdom of Pluto. And sometimes, I've heard this said many times, that it's a harder experience for the onlooker than it is for the person experiencing whatever it is that's going on. So it's often harder to imagine what it might be like for something tragic or difficult to happen than it is to actually experience it, because in the moment of experiencing it, you are dealing with it. You are using the best available survival tools that you have. Or, for example, you've disassociated, so you're not actually there experiencing it. So again, this is not to undermine people's experiences and undermine how they feel. I'm sure that they feel very tragic. And I know for myself that things can feel very tragic and harrowing. But the higher wisdom of Pluto is to say that often our fear of it is far worse than the actual experience itself when it happens. So Pluto is the ruler of Scorpio. So Scorpio is all about truth. It's about intensity and truth, and not avoiding the deepest truth, even if that truth is particularly difficult and harrowing. Scorpio is a sign of initiation. So it's the sign in which we dive into the deepest, darkest, difficult places of our psyches and emotions. We do the work, and it's intense, which is why it's also the sign of the psychologist or the healer. And we come out like a phoenix rising out the other side, having endured the tests of the underworld, seen them with our own eyes, faced them, and come out stronger and essentially less afraid of those things. And that gives us the freedom and liberation to access and explore and experience the true essence of who we are, which is much more lighter, freer, and joyful. So Pluto Square Pluto, for example, if someone's going through Pluto Square Pluto, then this is an opportunity, and this happens for everyone once in a lifetime, and it can be quite a difficult time, but this is an opportunity for that person to go face to face with their darkest demons and what they're most afraid of, and what they're spending the most amount of their time avoiding or trying to resolve, or even sometimes a person can avoid something that's really difficult for them by spending an enormous amount of time trying to heal that thing. So sometimes, for example, trying to heal something or going to therapy, trying to find peace with something is just another way of avoiding the actual raw experience of it. And sometimes with Pluto, the only way through is to actually just succumb, or surrender is probably a better word, to the experience as it actually is, and allow it to occur and pass through you as you watch it. So that doesn't mean acting upon that experience. It means allowing yourself to feel the experience. With Pluto is normally fear. So you allow yourself to feel the raw, intense fear of whatever situation that you're most afraid of or you're trying to avoid. So Pluto Square Pluto is your window, once in a lifetime window, for you to get to the heart of what your particular deepest fear and avoidance is. And if you can face it and allow it to process itself through you, then you come out the other side of that Pluto Square Pluto a little bit stronger and a little bit less afraid of the underworld and of the dark side, therefore freeing you up to allow you to access those other more beautiful parts of yourself and of the flow of life in general. It liberates you by freeing you from the chains and binds of the natural fears that we all have when we are living a human life. And when we get past those fears, we are freer to live in harmony and flow with the natural essence of the universe, which is peace and serenity and acceptance and joy and love. So where Pluto is in your chart, then the natal placement of your Pluto, which house it's in, gives you a strong clue as to what part of your life or your psyche is most you are most afraid of, or is most suppressed or most hidden, and needs to be dug down into and unearthed and faced, so that you can liberate yourself from that particular part of life that's holding you back. So as an example, Pluto Square Pluto, if Pluto is in natally in your 9th house, and therefore Pluto is squaring from your 1st house, that's one option, then the natal Pluto in the 9th suggests that you have very deeply hidden belief systems that are impeding your life, that are perhaps belief systems, psychological woundings and belief systems that don't add up and are not for the greatest good for you, for your life. So it might be a belief system, for example, that life is dangerous and hard. And that's a belief system. And if you were to liberate yourself from that belief system, you will then allow the space for yourself to see that the truth also is that life is easy and beautiful and safe. So you're unearthing a belief system that has been holding you back, and a belief system that you may have been suppressing because it's been so deeply hidden from you that you are unconsciously spending a great deal of your waking life avoiding this particular issue, or this particular negative, rather harrowing belief system that's in the way of you experiencing your true self. And then when Pluto comes through the first house and is squaring that Pluto, then you are working actively at that time on your core identity and your sense of self and who you are. This is first house stuff. So your sense of self and your identity, who you identify as in life, will be transformed and changed and liberated forever, most likely, because it's Pluto we're talking about. So it's deep, long-lasting change. There will be a transformation of your sense of self and your identity as a result of you digging deep and unearthing these deeply held, hidden belief systems that are based on fear and negativity and pessimism and a fear of annihilation. So that's just one concrete example. So wherever Pluto sits in your chart natally, whichever house it's in, this is the area of life where you have something of a Pluto nature, all of the difficult stuff I listed, like trauma, taboo issues, psychological woundings, existential fears, anything like that. That's where it is contained in your life. So if it's in the 7th house, for example, it's to do with how you relate to other people and relationships. If it's in the 3rd house, for example, it's about your ability to speak up. It's about your ability to say what you want to say. It's about how you communicate in life and how you get your message across, and also about your general perceptions in life and how you perceive life to be around you. If it's in your 10th house, for example, it's all centered around your career, your status, your sense of worth and identity out there in society. So look to where your Pluto is placed. The house that it's in is the arena of life where there are the deepest hidden subconscious fears that need to be faced square on in order for you to liberate yourself from the chains of fear. So I hope that that video has been helpful, and thank you very much for watching.